how did you actually get into the industry? Like, what were you like? How'd you come in?
I was working. I was a production manager at a hydraulic seal company, so I was already like doing like a lot of data stuff, and uh, I just started like tweeting stuff out. And actually, Denny Carter, CD Carter, was the one that found me, and he at the time was working for a site that was XN Sports. And then he brought me in, started writing articles, and just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, get pretty crazy.
Dude, I love Carter, man. Like, he's fun. He's awesome. He interacts with our girl Cooter Doodle over there. We have a blast, like, watching their interactions.
Yeah, Denny is awesome. He's the like a lot of people give Denny grief. He likes to alienate his followers, but Denny's literally the only reason I'm here. I've gotten to meet him and his family a couple times too. Also a great guy in person. But yeah, he's got a great Twitter account. His Twitter account is just amazing.
Dude, I love that, man. Yeah, his stuff is funny, man. It's entertaining, and he definitely still gets the point across. So I love it.
As I'm just pounding keys here as I retweet your tweet here.
You're good, man. I'm normally doing the same thing, and I don't even realize it. Like, I try to go on mute, and it just never ends up happening. All right, let's go ahead and kick this show off. Let's do this. Here we go.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
What is up, everybody? Welcome on into, yes, another episode of Fantasy Intervention coming at y'all hot and heavy. We got Rich Hribar in the house. What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Chase, man, it's great to catch up with you. We were trying to make this thing happen for a couple weeks, but life gets in the way, off-season life. So I appreciate you taking the time and bumping back your usual show an hour for me. I promise I'm not a diva or a prima donna, but I do appreciate you working around my schedule.
No, family comes first, man. I'm actually just stoked that you're here, man. I definitely appreciate you coming on in and taking your time out of your day, especially after you spent all day with your family and work, I'm sure. So appreciate you coming in. You want to let everybody know where they can find you at, how you're qualified to actually talk some fantasy football for those who do not know you.
Well, I don't know if I'm officially qualified or not. I just do it. Some people just accept it. But yeah, I'm at sharpfootballanalysis.com. This offseason, everything, nothing's paywalled in the offseason over there. So everything I've done so far, I already have about 30 articles on the site already this offseason that are free. At Lord Reeves at Twitter, just come find me there. But if you're not following, definitely come find your way over there.
No, absolutely. And I always enjoy your content. Every time I hear you on a show, right, I make sure that I pay attention to those shows. Anytime I see one of your articles comes out, I'm making sure I read one of those articles. You're one of my favorite people in the entire industry, man. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. So let's go over what we have lined up. We've got a show where we're going to talk a little bit of Sam Darnold. I don't want to get too much into it just because, it's pretty much been exhausted about that by this point, 18 hours into it. But, it is what it is. It's the off season, so it's been exhausted. But we also have best ball talk and rookie drafts. It's that season, guys and gals. It is that season where we have the best ball drafts and the rookie talk. And Rich has already been hitting on the best ball. He's been focused on the best ball hot and heavy over the past, 2 or 3 weeks now, minimum, not including the research he had to do. So I wanted to bring him in here, talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to dive from best ball straight into the rookie talk. So I want to talk about optimal lineups with you, Rich. I want to go with the optimal lineups of how you kind of build up your stuff. If you guys actually want to find his articles, he already brought it up. It's sharpfootballanalysis.com. And if you hit the /fantasy, of course, it'll be a little bit easier for you to find it. But he has 4 or 5 best ball articles out within the past week and a half, 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and if you hit just my pin tweet in my profile, it'll take you to all my content hub for this off season, like my own personal content hub.
Yeah, there you go. So you can find it relatively easily, because that's how I actually found your stuff. But wanted to make sure I gave the website a specific plug as well. Now,
appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, and I'm not going to go into your articles too much. Like, I don't want to sit there and I don't want to dive and talk about what you wrote. I want people to go find it out. So I'm going to give, more of a, I guess, a version of the way that you feel versus the stats and the analytics that you did research on, and how you actually, put that out. So what's your favorite platform and favorite way to build in terms of, upside versus floor when it comes to best balls?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options, to kind of go about that. I definitely like I play more in the FFPC format, and I've kind of started to shift there like last year, and then this year I'm going to do more there as well as far as league wise. So I like to just kind of keep everything in one place. So I am playing there more this year. I wouldn't say it's like specifically my favorite, because I don't really like tight end premium. I think it's kind of not a great, point delivery system. I think all it does, it should just be called premium tight end instead of tight end premium, because all it does is make the really good tight ends like really good fantasy players. Like, it doesn't make Hayden Hurst a good player. But I like to play like a little bit more like higher stakes, try to keep all my leagues in one spot as well. I've got some dynasty leagues there that I started there last year. I'm going to be doing, the football guys championships and then the big championships at the end of the summer there. So just keeping everything there. I would say, I think the ideal layout, I think Fanball, the original MFL 10s, like those probably have the best ideal layout. Like, if you're kind of just looking for actual format, it's start 3 wide receivers, it's PPR across the board, there's no kickers. FFPC has a slim product as well. It doesn't have kickers and defenses either, but it's, it's still tight end premium. You're only starting 2 wide receivers. I do like that Fanball has 3 wide receivers. Underdog is a great app right now. Those are all 3 tremendous, kind of outlets. I think if you want to play volume and just accessibility, the Underdog app is fantastic. So, I mean, all those sites, depending on what you want out of, your best ball league, like all those are fantastic options. Just not the one I'm going with most. And then kind of just diving into, how I like to build my teams. Definitely, I mean, even my season-long teams I'm a pragmatic player, but I definitely want to shoot for more upside anyways, even in seasonal leagues and in best ball. So I'm always going for the upside route. You had mentioned something about in the show sheet about like ranking in tiers. And if anyone's followed me this long, or if you're new for years, I mean, I don't really do my tiers like the rest of the industry. I just don't take my linear rankings and just chop them off and say like, running back 1 through 6, that's a tier. And then running back 7 through 14, that's a tier. I actually do my tiers based on, player archetype, how they are used on the football field, how they accrue their fantasy points. So I might have, say, like an example, I might have someone like Robert Woods on my actual rankings as like wide receiver 20, and I got like Tyler Boyd, like wide receiver 31. But in my tiers, those guys are in the same tiers. What that does is it allows me, to have, potential arbitrage opportunities, in my draft, play that arbitrage game, a similar guy at a cheaper cost, even though I believe that Robert Woods is a better fantasy asset than Tyler Boyd. And then you look at those tiers when they come up in drafts, based on where I'm up, Robert Woods might be the top receiver on my board in a linear list stance, but a player archetype such as like a Kenny Galladay, who has very similar archetype to Robert Woods, those archetypes thin out over the course of the draft, where guys like a Robert Woods might increase. You can find more of those types later as it goes on. That's not any shade towards Robert Woods or anything to say that I like Kenny Galladay. Those are just kind of like an example of like what I'm talking about, like in player archetypes and similar ADPs, as opposed to just like taking a list of players and just going down it and drafting the highest guy on that, which I just really don't subscribe to on any level. And it's one of the problems with like where rankings and how they're consumed to consumers, is a big bugaboo of mine, and drives me crazy that like rankings are from an SEO side just like so insanely popular and consumed the way they are, because I really think they're mismanaged in fantasy football.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, it comes to a point where you have younger players that have limited opportunities, that might be in the same tiers. You have even pass catching running backs, which is something that I'm studying pretty heavy right now, where you can end up having them all in the same tier if they should see the same target opportunity, depending on their, breakaway potential and, ability to score, how they get targeted in the red zone, et cetera. So I love that thought. I want to go ahead and break down the positions though. I want to talk about, what your articles are about. I want to go and actually dissect each position. But once again, we're not going to talk about like, what the numbers were behind the scenes for you, because I want people to go to, sharpfootballanalysis.com.
No one wants a podcast where I just like read percentages off. Like that's not great. That's not a great podcast.
Yeah, some do. I mean, I would enjoy a podcast like that, but I think I'm one of the few that actually would. So, we're going to have some fun with this. If we sit there, right? And obviously, like, there's certain rounds depending on how your roster construction goes, but is there a certain place where you try to grab a quarterback? Like, is it dependent on, how your roster build is going? Is it dependent on what players are available? What are you looking for when drafting a quarterback in best ball opportunities?
So the quarterback position in best balls and in seasonal leagues, but most are on best balls because you're not taking one quarterback in these. You're taking 2 to 3, depending on your strategy. But the quarterback position is the one where the room kind of dictates where you take the position more than any other position. I mean, sometimes you might get in a specific draft where the QBs just go later than they normally do. Sometimes earlier, sometimes right on ADP. But no matter what that room is kind of dictating the way I play the position, I always want to be in the pocket of the same pocket of the position, kind of regardless where the room is steering that kind of ship overall to position. You look at the way quarterbacks now are scored in fantasy football, the margin of excellence that pocket passers now have to deliver to be elite fantasy scores is just so razor thin compared to these guys that are dual threat assets. I mean, you have to run into a season like Aaron Rodgers did last year. And when you look at Aaron Rodgers' 2020, like historically, like, that should have been like an all-time QB1 season. But the way fantasy football is scored now, and there's so many guys that are offering production, not only with their legs, but guys that can run and throw. I mean, even a season like Aaron Rodgers has, like, doesn't even like really dominate the field like it would have in like previous years, they're like the early 2000s and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's really crazy. So I want to be in on that back end of like that subset of quarterbacks, those dual threat assets. I don't want to miss out on one of those guys. You look at it last year. So among the 11 quarterbacks last season to average 20 or more fantasy points per game, only Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady had single-digit percentage of their points come from rushing production. That was it. Just those two guys out of 11 quarterbacks. The average QB1, or the average amount of rushing points that come from those quarterbacks, was 21% of rushing points, which is that's 1/5 of all their season-long production. QB1s in fantasy football, they average 4.4 rushing points per game, but they also average 18.6 passing points per game. That's like the difference of like the old school when I originally did the Konami code and talked about like how this rushing upside for quarterbacks creates a floor, but now it's starting to be paired with guys that are just guys that can throw as well. It wasn't always that way, and now that we're getting all these quarterbacks that offer mobility and then this passing upside with the way the game has changed, it's just really hard to leave that archetype off the board. And the entire fantasy football community has come along for the ride and realized this as well, and all those guys are relatively expensive in the context of the position. I don't want to be first at the quarterback position. I'm not going to be the guy taking Patrick Mahomes or whoever the QB1 is, but I absolutely don't want to miss out on the back end of that subset as my QB1, especially in these best ball leagues. And sometimes I may even want to get 2 of those guys, but I largely want to stay in like that QB4 to QB15 kind of range. Don't want a lot of late round quarterbacks. And, just like in season long, these dual threat assets have made it harder to go late round quarterback because they can arbitrage these passing points. So you can play a guy like Derek Carr and stream him in a great matchup and make up some of Tom Brady's points. It's a lot harder to do to a Kyler Murray or a good Lamar Jackson day. It's really, really hard to arbitrage those kind of points, those 30-point plus games that archetype's giving you. So I definitely want to be in on the back end of that quarterback. Doesn't mean I won't draft Matthew Stafford. I won't draft Tom Brady, as my QB2. But I absolutely want to hone in on that dual threat asset.
Yeah, I mean, sitting there and looking at it, I know that Joe Burrow might not be like an ideal option, but Dave Toronto just brought it up that, in a startup, obviously we're talking about best ball, but in the startup, hopefully that doesn't tank him too bad. I'm sitting there and looking at Burrow. He had 3 rushing touchdowns this past season in 10 games. He also had over 140 yards. So Burrow might be somebody that can end up slipping a little bit, because of his injury and whatnot, that best ball players might actually appreciate, especially if they draft a tackle or maybe even a wide receiver to help them. With that being said, is there a player that you see that might slip or a certain player that you're going to be targeting heavily when it comes to the quarterback position in best ball moving forward for 2021?
So yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm looking at that subset of quarterbacks, and even when I'm at QB2s, I mean, I'm looking to get at the top if I can get a Lamar, a Dak, a Herbert, or Russell Wilson, even a Jalen Hurts, and then as a QB2, a Tannehill or Burrow. When I do take Burrow, I'd like to take 3 QBs. Just because of just because of the unknown factor. I mean, he's really going to be brushing against the start of the season. When you look at like all the medical guys I follow, like Edwin Porras, like those guys are always like kind of like, well, he's going to be really against that line at the start of the season. So then when that comes into play, I wonder if he really offers a lot of dual threat upside. We know he's capable of it, but coming off that injury, will he be kind of reluctant to start, like to use his legs? We'll see what happens. So when I do take Burrow, I do like to go 3 quarterbacks. To be kind of a hypocrite off of what I just said, a couple of guys that I've been drafting early on, just because I believe that they're going to rise as it comes on. But mostly the first one is Justin Fields. I've been drafting a ton of him because 1, the archetype we talked about, and 2, I believe his price will rise. Right now he's going as QB 28 in these early drafts. That's his ADP the past week in FFBC. And then also sidebar, let me play off this Justin Fields thing. You should be aggressive on rookies altogether right now. Most people are scared off by the missing, kind of the complete information. Like people want to draft guys that we know, like we just want to know what we're drafting. Right. So you can use that to your advantage and take a swing on some of these guys. And because rookie ADPs are going to bounce after the draft, they're going to bounce up. Most people aren't drafting those guys because they say, well, I don't even know where the guy's going to be. I don't know what the situation's going to be. So like Fields, like we know, like kind of a few things are keeping him down outside of that as well. For the I'll just see what happens crowd. He kind of has been like the punching bag by like by big NFL draft this season. Like every red flag he's had is getting like overly cherry picked and picked apart. But I believe
he's been in the
have
spotlight for 10 years now almost.
Yeah. But I already have him like as QB18 in redraft anyways. Like he'd have to go to a catastrophic place where I don't believe he has any shot of like starting, which really doesn't happen. I mean, last year Jordan Love was the first round rookie to not even start a game since Jake Locker in 2011. It's just a rarity. Guys play now in the NFL when there's high draft capital invested in them. But I've gone back and forth of even, ranking Fields as high over Trevor Lawrence in Dynasty just because of the fantasy element of the rushing upside. I've been really neck and neck, and ultimately I just think Lawrence's floor kind of wins out. But I do think that for fantasy, there's a conversation, the upside of Justin Fields and what he could bring, the way just fantasy football scored, because he's a guy that's going to rush for 700 plus yards. He's big. He's going to score touchdowns, and he's built like Cam Newton. And then you got the passing element, like I said, we don't have these guys anymore that are just one trick note runners. Like these guys all have passing acumen now. So I mean, he's a guy, like I said, it's hypocritical because I said not to go later on quarterback, but I believe that his ADP will rise. And then, like I said, in general, don't be scared to draft some of these rookies now. Sure, some of those picks will flame out, but a lot of these guys are going to get big ADP spikes. So don't be scared to swing on these guys early.
Let's go ahead and answer a question real quick. Is Lawrence a 300-yard rusher this upcoming year?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, Lawrence is a guy that you're not counting on him for rushing first points, but he definitely is athletic enough when you look at his collegiate career. That's why I said, like, this whole class, and you can go back to last year, at the top of that class, we're just starting to see that be the type of quarterback that's coming into the NFL now. These guys can all move. Herbert can move. You go back to last year. Tua, had some rushing upside when he played in his starts. Burrow, while he was drafted there, had over 600 yards when you remove the goofy college sack yardage. That drives me crazy. I have no idea why this is a real thing and we allow it to continue. That sack yardage counts against rushing yardage for collegiate quarterbacks. Then you look at this class now. I mean, obviously you have Lance and Fields, the two guys you are banking on rushing production when you take them. But both Zach Wilson and Lawrence offer mobility as well in their back pocket. I mean, they're going to be more scrambling types. Lawrence will have a little more design runs than Wilson, given his size at the NFL. But those guys can all move as well too. And that's just the type of quarterback that's coming to the NFL. And we're seeing teams really value that as well in the NFL. So I don't see any reason for it to slow down.
I think there's a underrated characteristic as well when it comes to, some of these rushing quarterbacks, and it's knowing how to take a hit. Like we saw it with RG3, he just didn't know how to take hits, and he might have been injury prone without it, but I mean, he didn't know how to put his shoulder down, get down to the ground. Very similar to how we were seeing with Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson knows how to take hits. Justin Fields, watching his tape, watching his runs, I mean, he's not taking too many big time blows, at least, to the face mask, to the chest, to the head. He's getting down in most cases. I think that Trey Lance plays a little more risky, but I think he's in a similar situation as to where I don't think we have to worry about them getting hurt if they do end up starting some games come 2021.
Yeah, and there's a great study done on quarterbacks actually are less injury prone on designed quarterback runs than in the pocket. If you want to find that out there, but it's definitely been proven too. I mean, and that makes sense too, because you're actually running with the football. You're taking a hit while running football. Now, RG is Robert Griffin's not a great example of that, but you look at a guy like Lamar Jackson, who's literally set like the record for like quarterback runs and design quarterback runs the past 2 years. When have you really seen Lamar Jackson take a hit?
He doesn't. He gets down the right way, and if he does, he's bowling through people, or he's knowing how to evade them. Like he's not taking like the big smack hits. He's knowing how to get down. It's great.
Yeah, it's typically when you're in the pocket is when those guys take hits, because you're getting hit without knowing you're taking a hit. You could feel pressure, but that's when you start to take real hits that you're not prepared for. Your body's not prepared for.
I think what people are more concerned with the amount of hits that people take versus the the actual hits that they are taking. So let's go ahead and bounce over to running back. Speaking of running backs who don't know how to take hits, we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But now, if we sit there and we look at the running backs for best ball, right? I know that running backs get hurt. I know that running backs are, the majority of them play 12 games a year, or whatever the case is. Are you somebody that believes in taking 6, 7, 8 running backs in best ball? Or are you trying to find like maybe 2, 3 studs and then like 2 or 3 handcuffs? Where do you sit with how many running backs you're drafting?
I mean, draft slot matters to kind of dictate what I'm going to do, especially early on. But I love in these going the modified 0 RB, the anchor RB1, whatever moniker you want to give it in these best ball leagues. Some people get like really triggered over like the monikers of these things, but what I mean by that is taking like one like kind of Gibraltar back, like an early round back that you're getting a lot of touches from, and then kind of leaving running back alone for a little bit and grabbing tight ends and wide receivers in those early rounds, and then coming back to running back throughout the rest of these best ball drafts, especially this time of the year. Because one, like I said, we don't have complete information. So you can gamble on incomplete backfields right now and try to hope you pluck some ADP value post-draft, whether it be a Myles Gaskin, a Mike Davis, a Chase Edmonds, the ghost of Tevin Coleman, whoever you like in that bucket of guys. Because here's what we can likely bet on for the NFL draft to happen. Someone's going to make it out of that group with elevation, because there are only 3 like locked in like RB1 types in this class. And then someone inherently we believe that is safe probably won't be as safe as we thought coming out of the draft. It happens every year.
Miles Sanders.
Yeah, it could be anything. Yeah, anyone's but even post draft, I love that strategy for a few reasons in these best ball leagues. Outside of the high win rates that accompanies it, and I wrote about these in the post too, that you could check that out. And it's also counterintuitive to how I play seasonal leagues. Like I don't draft like this in seasonal leagues at all, but it makes a lot of sense in these best ball leagues. And it's hold true on Fanball, it holds true at FFPC, that this is just a really good strategy. Because remember, in best ball, you were only looking, the difference between best ball and your season leagues is in your season leagues, you're only looking to beat one opponent per week. You just win that one weekly game. But in best ball leagues, like you're already getting grandfathered in your most optimal lineup. So these RB2 types, these pass catching guys that you brought up earlier, these guys that I have a lot of high variance into them, they're tough to project because they either are relying on game script, they don't score a lot of touchdowns, but they might have a random spike week. Those guys all get into your lineups, the backups, the handcuffs, the pass catchers. Those guys are tough to start in seasonal leagues. They're really hard it's really hard. The James Whites of the world, like that archetype. But if you look at James White's like history of win rates and best balls, it's awesome. He's been like above par every year except for outside of last year. For that reason, you don't have to get the weeks right with him. That archetype. You think of like big weeks from Nyheim Hines last year, or Tariq Cohen the year before that. That archetype gets a big bounce in these types of formats because they're just going into your lineup as opposed to having to pick and choose and get them right. A lot of the times in your seasonal leagues, like you're going to leave points from those guys on your bench. You just are. You're going to miss those weeks because they're tough to start. So I mean, that archetype specifically is really good in these leagues. So I like to get like that anchor RB. Maybe 2 sometimes, depending on where I'm in the draft slot. Like if you're at the back, you could ping pong 2 really good ones in a row. But most often than not, I'm coming out with 1. I'm hammering running back, or hammering wide receivers and tight ends in those early rounds, and then coming back later for running backs and letting those guys fill out and kind of just buckshotting the position.
I love that view on things, and it's almost how I view wide receivers to an extent. Trying to grab 1 or 2 stud wide receivers, but you still have 1 more wide receivers you have to start in most cases. So. When it comes to the running backs, do you like to try and handcuff? Like if you go grab a Dalvin Cook early, are you targeting an Alexander Madison? Are you going to maybe reach for him a round ahead of where you would normally take him? And are you also trying to handcuff your timeshare running backs like a Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt just in case one goes off and the other one doesn't?
The only argument I can make for handcuffing is if it is where both guys have standalone value. And then, if you have an injury, then that other standalone value guy just turns into like a moonshot. But outside of that, it's hard to really recommend a handcuff for the same reason. It's similar. It carries over into best ball leagues. What is the reason not to handcuff in seasonal leagues? You're only handcuffing your roster. That's like what you're doing. I mean, you're just restricting upside because you're using multiple roster spots for technically one roster spot, which is tough. I mean, draft other people's backups. Draft the other guy's backups because then you have a shot to have two running backs. Instead of using two spots for one running back. These weren't in the articles, but I did. Just a couple of data points. Fanball handcuffing the RB1 and the RB2 is just an 8% win rate. It's a little bit subpar of what the inherent win rate is. Taking the top three running backs on a team, only 6.1% win rate. And then FFPC is right at that 8.3% win rate baseline. So it's not like anything like you have to avoid. It's not like a big no-no, but it also, there's no suggestion to say like, yeah, it's a smash thing. It elevates you and it elevates your win rate. So it's just not something I do. I want to try to maximize every roster spot I have. And you think of the definition of what handcuffs are, you're only handcuffing yourself.
It's kind of funny. We actually have sorry if I mispronounced your name. Is it Iki Azar? I'm guessing. So, he's in the chat over here and he said, I read that RB injuries were up 38%, making, what does it say? Yeah, 0 RB a smash last season. Will regression give value to the RBs? And it's kind of funny because I wrote an article on this that I passed over to Edwin to check over to make sure I wasn't just crazy. And Edwin reviewed it and he's like, this is incredible. And we talked about it for a while, but back in 2011 with the CBA agreement, when there was a lockout, we also didn't have an off season where the trainers and everything could get involved with the, with the players, and they couldn't ramp up. Essentially, is what we came to conclusion with, and so it created a ton of injuries back in 2011. Back to it for 2020, we had a ton of injuries this past year, so our running backs took a huge dip. But I don't think it was that insane when it came to the top end running backs. I just think it was more noticeable because it was the top two running backs drafted with Saquon Barkley and, of course, Christian McCaffrey that took the giant hit. So do you think there's going to be a regression to his question? Do you think there's going to be a regression that will give value to more running backs in this upcoming season?
Yeah, and Edwin was really hammering that point last year coming into the season about how, going back to the 2011 season and the fact that there was no trainers involved and that injuries could spike.
Yes.
The thing I'm looking at this year is this added game and if it impacts any teams. No one knows. The 17th game, like no team's just going to go out and just give Derrick Henry an extra 30 carries, right? Maybe Derrick Henry, but I'm having a real hard time when I'm in your early projections adding this game. Will there be more running back maintenance this year, or load management is what the NBA uses, right? Will there be some of that this year adding this game? Because our team's going to be more reluctant to just go out and give these guys, these 20 touchbacks, that many touches when there's an added game and then potentially, more game in that game, how far you go from the playoffs. And if I haven't heard anything about this bye weeks, will there be an extra bye week or not? But it's just, it's really tough to nail down. When you're looking at these running back shares that you would have projected over a 16-game season, you're adding the 17th game, are those stable or do they come down? Does this thing get spread out a little bit? It's easier to say a target share can be steady, but these running back touches, are they going to really be is there going to be some kind of, so we know some teams will just be dumb and not care. But are some of these more teams that are analytical or more into the sports science side, are they going to kind of work in that, more of a running back rotation? No one really knows this type of stuff. This is just all of us, shooting hypotheticals. But I have a hard time believing there's just going to be now 10 running backs that get 300 carries when there's 2 last year. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's really kind of a tricky area. What the 17th game does. I haven't seen Edwin commented either. Edwin's my go-to guy as well on this stuff. He's a great dude. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what the 17th game does, more so for the running back position than any other position there is.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. What if running backs are starting to realize that they're not getting paid, crap right now, right? I did an article back around May of last year, talked about how it was them, centers, and one other position, I want to say it's strong safeties or whatever it was, where there was only 3 players that were making over $10 million per year. but yet they're getting, 30% of the workload essentially, including like the passing network. So like they're getting crushed right now and they're not making anything for money because you can just replace and put a new player in there and you're good to go. Meanwhile, we saw, Kareem Hunt, re-sign a contract with Cleveland, right? And then Nick Chubb's there. So it's a split workload essentially. We saw Melvin Gordon go to the Broncos and split a load with Philip Lindsay and essentially take less money, although he did, have money in the back end. What if we start to see some of these running backs like Marlon Mack, for example, right? Sign with another stud, go back to Indianapolis where he knows that he doesn't have to do a huge workload, but he gets a little bit of reduced money compared to what he could probably get on the market just to elongate their careers. They start making almost like an NBA super team, but just a super team backfield essentially in order to not get the workload that they would see if they were the main running backs. I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I mean, we're right now too where we have an abundance of running back talent in the league too as well. Maybe it thins out over the next couple of years, but I know that next year's running back class is pretty decent as well. There's some really good studs in the college level. It's gonna be really interesting to see how it plays out with some of these guys joining hands and just having more than one viable running back. And like I said, tied in the 17th game, especially like what are teams going to do and make their backfields kind of look like? There's more talent than there is running back jobs. That's the problem.
Yeah, and honestly, like some of these veteran running backs, they just want to stay in the league a little bit. I mean, they just want to keep getting a workload. I mean, look at Mark Ingram just went and sat behind, David Johnson. I don't think David Johnson has a problem with it because David Johnson's, been hurt his entire career. So if he can get a little bit less work, I'm sure he's happy to stay in the league. But let's go ahead and hop over to wide receivers because I like safer running backs normally. I still like taking my dart throws with these pass catching running backs, but I love my dart throws wide receiver. I want to get like one or two studs within the first 3 rounds. And then I just want to like swing for the fences in round 7 and beyond in best ball. I want to go for the Will Fullers. I want to go for the Marquise Browns. What's your strategy on this? Is this something you think is out of left field? Are you more wide receiver heavy? Is it completely, dependent at that point on, your draft spot? How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly target hunting first and looking for upside. Last year I was not individually like really high on Keenan Allen or Stephon Diggs at all, like from a ranking stance or even like a projection stance. But like I ended up with those guys in a lot of leagues because for their target volume, their projected target volume, like they were just way too cheap. And I didn't particularly like those guys, but it didn't really matter because I was buying targets at a certain point. And that's kind of what I look to first, look for discounted targets, guys that are kind of, are projected for a lot of targets and then, are just kind of underpriced. I have no problem with like consistently, chasing the upside. I prefer to play that way. I kind of mentioned it earlier. I do draft some floor-based options, especially when they're cheaper options and they're underpriced, believed on the type of volume they're going to get. But my personal preference is to chase those spike weeks. That's what I look for, especially, guys that are getting consistent targets that are the types of targets I want. I did an article last year on the value of targets, a target isn't a target. A deep target is worth, more points than a slot target, that's under 10 yards on field. A red zone target is worth more than that. A target inside the 10 is worth more than that. An end zone target is worth almost double of that. It consistently rise. So I'm looking for guys that get a lot of those types of high calorie fantasy point targets. That's what I want. It actually might be an unpopular take, but I actually am in the consistency is overrated crowd for fantasy football, even for non-best ball formats and seasonal leagues as well, especially at the wide receiver position. There are very few players who are consistently high scorers every week in an individual season on a player level. And you look at fantasy scoring in general, it's not a bell curve. Someone just doesn't slowly have their high game and low points. It's all over the place. It's a scatter shot. There's spike weeks. You might score 30 points one week, you may have 8 the next week, 12 the next week, then 24. And then, but when you look at the average fantasy matchup, the outcomes are really not as tight as you believe they are. There was a study done by Adam Harstead at Football Guys years ago. It's an oldie but a goodie if you can find it, where it really showed that the average fantasy matchup is not really as close as you really think it is. Most of these are one-sided matchups and you come to your week. Definitely you have some sweats and those stick out in your mind because they were sweats where you needed someone to do something on Monday night. But the average fantasy matchup is really just not that close. And then what I'm really trying to hone in on is making a point of emphasis is that low scoring fantasy weeks do not lose you weeks to the level they do. Like high fantasy scoring weeks win weeks for you. And that's, I think, what people a lot of misconstrue when they think about consistency. It's and then when you look at consistency in itself, it's relatively unstable itself. I mean, what is consistency doesn't carry over year to year. Individual player variance is kind of mitigated across a full lineup anyways. When you lose, you're kind of predisposed to assign blame to low scores. You're like, oh, I lost because that dude got me 6. But it's really probably not you lost. It's probably almost always that you had multiple lack of top peak performances. If you kind of go back to it. So, I mean, you look at like the conundrum of, would you rather have a player that was a guaranteed to score 10 points every week, but he never did more than that? Or like another player that had a 50% chance of scoring 25, but also a 50% chance of scoring 0. As the number of starting spots increases, you'd still rather have player B. Player B is going to beat player A more times, even though you'd say, I don't want to take this 0. You think about like consistency, like think about like TJ Hawkinson last year. Like TJ Hawkinson is a great example of consistency being overrated. He outkicked his ADP. Everyone said he was a value. He won you nothing. You won nothing because of him. He won you no weeks. I like TJ. That's not a slam, but he's like a great example of where consistency is overrated, because people say, oh, he was a great pick. He hit value. Well, yeah, you didn't brick the pick. He didn't get you 0, but you also could have took Justin Jefferson at that spot and won multiple weeks. He would have won you weeks. TJ Hawkinson had no like real top tight end performances in a year where tight end performances we were thirsty for him. We had 2 guys give them to us all year, Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, completely smashing the field. But yeah, I mean, consistency is definitely overrated in fantasy. I know a lot of people, it's not popular. You should draft the way you want to draft. I personally, especially at the wide receiver position, I am more upside inherent. I want to chase guys that can win me weeks. I don't care if he gives me a 10 one week or an 8 or a 6. If he's capable of scoring 30, I want those guys. I want those guys in my lineup, because you can't come back from those when those guys drop big games on you. But you know what? You can still survive when they have low scoring games. Like I said, low scoring weeks do not lose you weeks to the level of where high scoring weeks win you weeks. And people have a hard time getting over that hurdle.
No, I agree with you to an extent. It still makes me nervous when I go with that with some of my high picks. I kind of like playing the DFS side with my my wide receiver 3. That's where I'm going for. But I can definitely get on board with that 100%. And speaking of the tight end position, which we're going to get into Hawkinson here in a second, but I was looking at your charts, obviously, and you guys can find them on twitter.com, right? / what is it? Lord Reeves, REEBS. And you go to his pinned tweet. You go there and you can see all of his, I guess, outcomes of how teams did when they drafted a wide receiver early. But teams that did draft a wide receiver early, what is this? In the FFPC, when they got a tight end next, they yielded the highest return of winning percentages. And with FanBall, it was wide receiver, running back, then tight end. Mm-hmm. So why is it so crucial to grab a tight end, with 2 of the first 3 picks or so? Is it just because they are so dominant?
Yeah, I mean, there's a positional leverage. Remember, FFPC is that tight end premium, which I said we might as well just flip it to premium tight end scoring and just call it something else, because that's why you see that spike there, that 1.5 PPR scoring, especially for a guy like Travis Kelce. You just look at the chart I put on Travis Kelce in that article. Travis Kelce is the only player in FFPC formats. Well, there's 2 players. He's the only position player that has a winning percentage of 10% or higher in each of the last 4 years. The other one is Robbie Gould. So, I mean, like, you're basically getting a guy that's just out kicking your inherent baseline of win rate just by instantly taking that guy. And it's because of the scoring for Travis Kelce. On FanBall, he has not been that locked in consistently. He's had a lot of great seasons, especially last year. He actually was the highest player on FanDuel win rate than any player in the league last year. FFPC is actually 4th, but it was still 20%. He's doubling your inherent win rate just by taking him. And then you look at Darren Waller the past 2 years. I mean, he's been 18.4%, 20.3%. I know that I give no solace to anyone that drafted George Kittle in round 2 last year. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make you feel any better. The process was right. You just ran into some unfortunate circumstances where you got banged with injuries, unlucky injuries. But yeah, I mean, even on FanBall, though, it does start to oscillate back to where early round tight ends have an advantage. There's positional leverage with those guys because the bottom of the position is just so trash. And tight end premium doesn't even help it. Like I said, like the biggest misconstrue is like tight end premium is makes these guys like Austin Hooper look like compete with Keelan Cole. That's like the goal of it. But like that doesn't matter. Like does not help you win leagues though. Like it's just making those guys kind of be like, well, I guess I could play him. But yeah, it really hurts. The bottom is this position of the tight end is so bad. Every year we talk ourselves into some of these guys. We're going to do it again. We might even do it in a couple minutes.
I'm about to do it.
But it's the way. That's just the way it is. I mean, tight end, good tight ends have just been such a leverage play in best ball. They don't have as much opportunity cost either than they do in a season-long league. Like you take George Kittle in a season-long league last year, and that's your round 2 pick, and you only have to start one tight end, and you missed that pick. Not only did you miss on George Kittle, you missed on taking a running back or a wide receiver there. That's our old phrase, opportunity cost, because you need multiple of those running backs and wide receivers across the course of your draft to fill your roster than more than you need a tight end. So you got double whammied. The opportunity cost isn't as existent in best ball formats as it is in season long leagues. So, I mean, yeah, those early round tight ends have been really good leverage plays, more so on FFPC, but even on FanBall, they are kind of like a strong asset to have.
So let's go ahead and let's see. Are we going to talk ourselves into it? Are we going to talk ourselves into Hockenson this year or any other tight end that has this breakout potential? Irv Smith Jr. has been a hot topic lately. You know, who are we talking ourselves into? Is Hockenson actually going to be the guy this year? You know, will he see the targets? Even if they draft, let's just say a Devonta Smith, you know, or Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, I think right now Hawkinson's definitely in the forefront there. Like I said, he was already productive, increased everything across the board in year 2 from year 1. We've got kind of all this, this wide receiver depth chart is just bad. They really don't have anything right now on this wide receiver depth chart. So, I mean, it's definitely looking like he's going to be the primary target. We know that at least Jared Goff is capable. Kind of that's his wheelhouse, that intermediate zone. And we know Hockenson has touchdown potential. For a team that's probably not going to score a lot of touchdowns, but he can get you to that 8 to 10 range, which is a lot, especially at the tight end.
God, what was that Thanksgiving where he had a wide open run to the end zone, and for some reason he ran towards the safety?
Was
that Thanksgiving? Like, it was. That is one of the biggest mind blowing plays I've ever had watching football. Like, you had a straight line to the end zone. Instead, you go 6 or 7 yards inwards towards the safety. He could have had a touchdown. And oh man, those plays kill me. They kill me inside. And I love Hockenson, but they kill me inside.
Yeah, I mean, Hawkinson's going to be that guy that he's, probably at minimum going to go like tight end 5. He'll be the guy I think that goes after it. In some leagues, he might even go ahead of Mark Andrews as well. I could definitely see that, going down as well. Irv seems to be the guy that everyone is like in on. Like, he was good the last year when Rudolph missed time. He has another guy that has touchdown potential. They don't really have a wide receiver 3. They don't even really use a wide receiver 3 in Minnesota anyways. They were lowest in the league in 11 personnel usage last year as well. I think that, I can be coaxed into Gerald Everett playing with Russell Wilson. They don't have a wide receiver 3 either. They lose the third highest target they had last year. David Moore is gone. He went to Carolina. So I could kind of talk myself into Gerald Everett a little bit just because Russell Wilson has been such a talent elevator over the course of his career. Targets from Russell Wilson are some of the most valuable targets they get. He doesn't always throw in terms of volume as much as the other quarterbacks, but he is consistently like top 3 in end zone targets every year.
I was just about to say, especially the tight end in the end zone. Like, he's always targeting tight ends in the end zone. Always.
And he's the only quarterback to throw 30 or more touchdowns in each of the past 4 years. And then as a direct pivot, I think, Everett leaving helps Tyler Higbee out. Tyler Higbee is a guy we already seen is capable of being a tight end 1. He's given us that. He's getting a quarterback upgrade. We know the scheme is good there. We could trust that offense to a degree. I don't know what to do with Adam Troutman. I don't know what we're going to do there. But, I mean, those are the guys like people are going to talk themselves into. I think most people are kind of a little scared out what's happening in New England because those are 2 guys, well, especially Jonnu. Everyone is waiting for Jonnu to be freed. And, he signs at New England, and you're even saying, all right, well, the target spike's there. And then the day after they signed Hunter Henry.
That was so painful. That was so painful because I'm a huge Jonnu Smith guy, and I like Irv Smith Jr. too. He's one of my guys.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that everyone's kind of looking at, like, how far will he go? Can I get him around tight end 10? That's where I want to be. Because, historically, that trap zone has always been after the top tier of tight ends. People start to get freaked out. They're in like the 5th or 6th round of their draft, and they're like, oh, I missed out on the top tight ends. But you know what? I've got a couple wide receivers. I got some running backs. I can roster fill a little bit. So then they take the next tight end, and then the next guy panics. He's like, well, I'll get the next tight end. But that has been the trap zone for tight ends. Like that tight end 5 through 10 area has been like historically over the past decade been like a really like no spot. Like you're gonna get hooked in there, and you're gonna really regret it. You're gonna take a player like Evan Ingram or stuff like that. Like you could talk yourself in the upside of these guys, but they just historically have not hit in that area, which is really hard.
All right, so we normally have a club in here, right? It's called the Cole Kmet Club. So I have to ask. We got like, a whole slew of people that love Cole Kmet.
Is that a thing? Is this a real thing?
Oh, the Cole Kmet Club is very real. Oh, it's very real. I got to make sure that I clip this out to share with the crew, and then they can berate you.
Contingency. I know there's a Cole contingency out there.
Oh man, so no, they hired Clancy Barone as the tight ends coach, right? And he's had a Pro Bowl tight end for 8 of the 11 years that he's coached the position up to last year. So now it's like 8 out of 12. Anyways, is Cole Kmet even on your radar? What tight ends are
we talking about? I actually don't know. Like, I don't know. What tight ends are we talking about, though? Are these Pro Bowl tight ends?
Some of them actually weren't good. It's going to take me a second to pull it up, and I'll get it to you while you answer this question. But, is Cole Kmet even on your radar?
So. I mean, I don't mind because he's in that gaggle of guys. Well, he's a year 2 tight end. We always like to slow burn these tight ends. He's more of a catch and fall tight end type though. That's like not as exciting for me. Like that he's very, kind of like the Hayden Hurst, the Austin Hoopers, the Logan Thomas. Like he's great as much volume as they give him. But I don't know if there's a lot of upside with him. Like I don't think Cole Kmet's gonna be a guy that's breaking a lot of tackles, creating yards for himself. And then they got Jimmy Graham still. What are we doing? Like, they better not play Jimmy Graham like they did at the end of last year. Like, because he wouldn't play. Like, Cole Kmet was getting all this burn, and they get inside the 10, and then here comes Jimmy Graham targets. And you're like, what is happening?
Every time. And
because DraftKings had Cole Kmet at 2,200 for he was like getting 7 targets a game, and they weren't even moving his price because the targets didn't matter he was getting. It was so frustrating because you wanted to play him like, well, I'm going to take this cheap tight end and take these targets. Eventually he's going to get in the box, right? And then Jimmy Graham was like a one-handed touchdown. And you're like, what is happening?
Pretty much. So, all right. We have him coaching the Atlanta Falcons 2005, 2006. That was Tony Gonzalez, right?
Okay.
I'm guessing.
That one. Yeah.
Off the top of my head. And then we have San Diego Chargers 2007, 2008, which was probably Antonio Gates, right? If I remember right. And then he had the Denver Broncos in 2009. I don't know who that was. Then he had the Denver Broncos again from 2011, 2014.
That's Jules. That was Jules. Jules wasn't 2009, though.
No, the 2011 to 2014 though, but that was Peyton Manning, right? So
yeah, and Peyton Manning. Not even just Jules, Peyton Manning.
And then the Minnesota Vikings 2017, that was probably Kyle Rudolph. So that
it'd be Rudolph.
Yeah, so it's pretty much Antonio Gates.
See, because this is the stuff that I always get when we get into these coaching narratives.
Yeah.
I need some more context. Like you gave me 2 Hall of Famers. You gave me a guy that played at Peyton Manning. I don't know who off the top of my head was that Broncos 2009 guy, but I don't know if I can credit the tight ends coach for these successes.
It's a narrative that I love to play to.
I'm going to have a hard time saying that this guy is just going to turn Cole Kmet into Antonio Gates. But I do think Cole Kmet is an interesting prospect. Year 2 guy. I'm pretty down on the Bears in general outside of, we know what Allen Robinson gives us because he just does what he does. But like this Bears, what is happening to this organization now? Like they willingly went out and just said, we're cool with Andy Dalton as our starting quarterback, like in March. Like imagine being a fan of that team and just knowing in March that you have no hope. Like they just don't even not even, you could take like Kyle Trask and at least you might not even like Kyle Trask, but you'd be like, well, maybe. Like what Andy Dalton is. Like
I've been a Washington fan my whole life, so I don't have any sympathy for the Bears. Okay, I have 0 sympathy for the Bears.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah,
I respect it though. I respect it. I don't mind Cole Kmet at all at his ADP. I don't want to turn into the negative Cole Kmet either.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and bump it over to another rookie, I guess. Right? Cole Kmet being a rookie in 2020. Is Kyle Pitts going to be drafted too high, especially in best ball, or is he going to be somebody that you can still target? Is the landing spot dependent?
It's pretty interesting, the Kyle Pitts dilemma. I mean, on one hand, we've kind of hinted on it, like tight end prospects been historically a slow burn. Just one tight end has cleared 200 PPR points. That was Keith Jackson all the way back in 1988. Just 5 have cleared 150 PPR points. The latest being Evan Ingram in 2017. So you can still get there. But on the other hand,
Ditka cleared it though, didn't he? Didn't Ditka clear it? Ditka had it cleared because he had Mike Ditka because he had 1,000 yards and like 12 receptions in his rookie year. 12 touchdowns in his rookie year. I think.
He might have been one of the 5. I need to go back and check it. But I know Evan Ingram was the last one to do it. was in 2017. But on the secondary angle, like Kyle Pitts kind of looks like the Calvin Johnson of tight end prospects.
Yeah, it could be the freak. It could be the outlier.
It could be the anomaly.
Overused.
But the problem is everyone kind of thinks that already, and it's reflected in his ADP.
Yep.
That's where my problem is. So the problem is Pitts is already being drafted in that no zone we talked about. The tight end. You don't want to take your tight end one there. Even in these best ball leagues, you don't want to take your tight end one there. Kind of highlight it in those articles as well. But you don't want to take your tight end one in that spot. That's where he's going. But historically, it's been a good spot for tight end twos in that spot. Like taking two of those tight ends, not relying on a Hunter Henry or like a Kyle Pitts, an example, to be your tight end one, but Kyle Pitts to be your tight end two. Now I have some more interest in that than having him be my front man. But the odds are, just with Kyle Pitts, is that someone in my league is going to be more willing to pay the tax than I will. But I really do not have a lot of pushback on people chasing Kyle Pitts. I really don't. Like I said, I probably won't have him a lot, but I don't really have a lot of pushback for those people that want to, because he does look like a unicorn, man. I know we've done this a couple times with some tight ends. I'd say if you want to say he resembles, Vernon Davis, like we went down that road. I mean, Vernon Davis got drafted into like an all-time like bag spot though. Like those early 49ers teams were trash. Like that.
They were so bad.
He got drafted the year after they took Alex Smith 1. Those teams were horrendous. If Kyle Pitts goes to Atlanta at 4, with in Arthur Smith's system, like Matt Ryan, you got
no
Julio
defense.
Jones, you got no defense. Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Matt Ryan.
Wheels up.
I'm going to be able to talk myself into some Kyle Pitts
and
at that point.
No running back. No running back either.
I mean, it's going to be.
So he's going to be used in short yardage situations as well. Like, he's going to rack up the receptions. He's going to rack up the red zone targets. He's going to rack up the third down plays. He's going to rack up everything. He's going to be a monster.
And if it happens, there's going to be a contingency that just says, well, look what Arthur Smith did to Johnny Smith. When you can't won over the Titans personnel playing under Mike Vrabel and just say, that's what the Falcons are going to do. The Falcons have 2 legitimately good wide receivers. They don't have Derrick Henry. I mean, like, they're not going to run their offense like they ran it in there. Sure, they're going to do now schematically, they're going to do a lot of things they did. They're going to run a lot of play action. They're going to run a lot of like deep crossers and digs where you clear out that front level of linebackers, because it doesn't matter. It's already been shown. It doesn't matter if you have Derrick Henry or not. Those linebackers are coming up on those plays. Play action works, even if your running game is trash. It's been proven. I mean, those receivers are going to feast on those routes too, especially those 2 types of receivers, Julio and Calvin Ridley. But yeah, you add Kyle Pitts there. But a lot of people, if Kyle Pitts gets drafted to Atlanta, people are going to be like, nope, I'm out. Arthur Smith, like, look what he did to Johnny. When it's a completely different player and a completely different set of players he's going to be working with.
Yeah, no, true. And I mean, the thing that sucked was the fact that, Johnny was actually performing over the first, 4 or 5 weeks when they were missing both Corey Davis or AJ Brown, like he was performing, and they both came back and all of a sudden became obsolete. But I mean, dude, they could use, they could use him like they used Corey Davis along with Johnny Smith. They could pile it into the 2. But
absolutely.
Are you going to take with the top 5 rookie pick in Superflex tight end premium league?
Oh yeah, in tight end premium for sure. And then without tight end premium, I mean, I think he's right in that line. If anyone likes him more than even Chase, I think it's fine as well. I don't really have pushback on that at all. But definitely in tight end premium, absolutely jam him up.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump into some other rookies that you have, because you put out a tweet where you actually compared, your running backs that, are supposed to be drafted. And I just was very curious on a few of them. You have like Najee Harris with Larry Johnson. I could see that 100%. I think that Najee might be a little bit more mobile, but 100%, like, it should be on the same plane. And they're both equally have, immense upside, right? Travis Etienne with D'Angelo Williams. What was your thought process with this one?
Well, none of these had any thought process at all. They're just computer-generated comps.
Oh, gotcha. I didn't. Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people did. On some of them, it says like their model. They're just their model comps. So it's like they're just computer-generated based on physical, athletic profile, age-adjusted production, out of college, and those were like some of the guys. So some other guys that come up in Najee Harris. I do a yearly article on this too, because when you look at these comps, like people always do comps, and they do, because your mind goes to either the bottom or the top. It's the same thing in life.
Yep.
Like no one remembers like a bunch of Tuesdays you had when you're 18, like that nothing happened. You remember like low points or high points. So like when people see like a trade or something, it immediately goes to like a top end comp or a low end comp for like someone that struggled or something. Like this year now, it's like every clasher is like, well, JJ Arthur-Whiteside, like I just reminds me of that guy.
You're not seeing the Zach Pascals of the world out there.
Yeah, and it's but it player comps get just overemphasized on traits instead of just looking back at like how comparable was this player to other prospects that had this same type of collegiate career and athletic profile, and those are those guys that spit out. But I always do like a top 5, like some other guys on Najee Harris. So Najee Harris is a particularly like interesting example because he's an older prospect. Obviously the Bama running backs. He played behind Josh Jacobs, had a late breakout. I actually do believe he played his cards right. I think that he looked at last year's class and he would have been caught into kind of the quagmire of it, but he looks a lot better in this class than he would have last year, especially at the top. So I do think he played his hands right because he's an older prospect and he had his best year at an older age. He has more like throwback player comps because often the guys that have the profile Najee Harris just go pro. They just go pro early. So he had like Larry Johnson's an older prospect, later breakout, high workhorse. But then you have Najee Harris too. The unique thing about him is he's a big back, 230 pounds, but he's like a really good pass catcher and has a great pass catching profile. The only backs over 225 pounds that had more receptions than him in his final season, in their final season of college, were Steven Jackson and Saquon Barkley. Larry Johnson was a guy that had some pass catching prowess. He'd had that in the NFL as well. He caught balls. But he has more throwback comps. Some other guys that come up for him that no one's going to like. Toby Gerhart is in there, Carlos Hyde, older prospects. But that's why you do player comp stuff. Because I told you, everyone goes to the high and low end, but they're first like more like a sobering analysis to kind of reel you in.
I don't mind the Carlos Hyde.
Yeah,
I don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, second round pick, good profile, but he was an older prospect all himself. But yeah, I do those player comps for more of, like I said, like a sobering analysis to kind of bring me in, to show you the spectrum of players that came to the league like this. It doesn't mean anything that like he's going to be any of those guys. He's going to be Najee Harris. But it's just nice to see that, player comp list that just isn't everyone rushing out to like the far end of like, going to some elite player. I actually came out on the more positive. I've been kind of more down in this running back class, but some of those player comps that you reeled off made me feel a lot better. I mean, like Travis Etienne, like looking like the, more like a D'Angelo Williams type. That's more upside than I was originally giving him credit for. It makes me feel a lot better. A lot of people got really offended because Kerryon Johnson was the Javonte Williams one. But Kerryon Johnson was actually a solid prospect. He was a solid rookie. I know a bunch of people listening to this drafted Kerryon Johnson his second season. He just, circumstances happened to him. He fell into a bad spot with the coaching staff that didn't know what they were doing and then had injuries. But he was a legitimately solid prospect. And Javonte Williams doesn't have, a high workhorse resume in college because he shared, snaps with the running back in this class and Michael Carter. So he doesn't have like a huge workload profile or a lot of production. So he's not going to measure up, objectively with a lot of those types that he's getting comped to, like Nick Chubb or something like that. He just doesn't have that kind of production, although his production isn't bad either. Like I said, Kerryon Johnson's production wasn't bad, but that was the one that got most people triggered. But yeah, I mean, those are the reason I do those comps. I haven't put out the wide receiver ones yet. I usually put them in an article, but you can go back and even look at last year's. I've made articles on those, and I like just seeing some of the names that pop up. Like one of J.K. Dobbins' like top 5 was Bishop Sankey. You see stuff like that, and people get offended at it. But like Bishop Sankey was the top running back taken in that class. He was taken in the second round. But we only think about Bishop Sankey the career, right? Everyone just thinks like in retrospect, like what happened? Oh, that dude sucked. Look at this, bottomed out. And granted, I'm sure there's people that didn't like him as a prospect as well, but the league liked him. He was a high draft pick. He had a high athletic profile. Was highly productive. We just think of the outcome instead of the prospect. That's where people and that's where people get these player comps wrong. They're not they're comparing to these players to the pros and not the prospect coming out of the league.
No, it makes plenty of sense. I mean, the one that hurt me the most, though, because we talked about like Najee Harris, right, and how he made the right decision going back to school. What happened with Chuba Hubbard in his 40 time? Like, I am dying inside because I didn't love Chuba Hubbard, but at least I thought he had some speed on him, right? I thought he had some wheels. Like, this guy was training to be an Olympic track star in the 100 and 200s, right? When he was still in high school, he's coming out of high school, early college days, he's running. He was estimated to run a 4.3 40 or mid 4.3s. But still, he goes out there and runs what? A 4.5 essentially. Like, what is going on with Chuba Hubbard? He got comped to Jeremy Langford, who is not the best college prospect coming out. I mean, he was okay, but not the best. You know, what happened with
Hubbard is, right? Like, he's kind of okay. He was a tough guy because, you know, if he comes out last year, his comps probably look totally different. His objective comps. You know, I don't think he plays anything like Jeremy Langford. You know, it's just, you know, a guy, though, that had a spike and then kind of a decline. He was the closest kind of objective guy, you know, from physical profile, you know, and then production. He was slower than we thought. He still has an okay speed score. It's 76 or 67th percentile. It's not like a death knell. Tylan Wallace was like that too. If you go back to his, like, he was like a long jumper in high school and like was like a competing long jumper, and then like his explosion score was trash. All his jumps were trash. And I was like, well, what the hell? I mean, he had the ACL injury, so maybe that affected some stuff. But like, he was another guy when you looked at his background, because there were some of these guys with the track backgrounds that were really notable that, you know, that destroyed, you know, like Dwayne Eskridge was one of those guys. But Tylan Wallace was, he was another guy that had like a long jumping background and then didn't jump anywhere near what we thought he was going to do. But yeah, Hubbard, if he comes out last year, it's a totally different story. So now we're just in this really gray space of what do we do? We know he's not going to get drafted highly. Like, what's probably the best outcome? Like, maybe third round is an optimal outcome. Fourth round to six. Like, you can go anywhere. That's the whole problem with this whole secondary tiers of this running back class is no one knows where these guys are going. Like, what the value is on these guys.
You brought it up earlier. How much talent's in there?
Yeah. Could Trey Sermon go in the third? He could. Could he also go in the fifth? Probably. Like, I mean, we don't know. Like, where?
Well, and you know, Benjamin on us, you know.
yeah. I mean, we don't know. It's not like last year where we had just a litany of like high profile guys. We have 3 guys this year that we feel good about, and then after that, all hell breaks loose. Like, we don't know who is going to be. We don't even know who like is the locked in RB4 in terms of draft capital. It could be Sermon, it could be Gainwell, it could be Michael Carter. Someone might like another running back. Like, we just don't know. We have no idea. So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how that secondary tier plays out. I will tell everyone, like, let's not Keyshawn Vaughn this thing. Like, don't let where a player goes like dictate you moving a guy that you had at RB15 like all the way to RB5. Like, let's not go crazy.
I actually had Keyshawn Vaughn higher before his landing spot,
and then moved him down.
I moved him down.
No, there you go.
You know, so it was him and Cam Makers. I both had a lot higher, and I ended up moving both of them down. But I don't want to keep you for too long. We're already over an hour. I want to get you in with one more question. And is there a player in this rookie draft that you're just going to have a ridiculous amount of shares of because you feel like you're higher on him than anybody else and you're willing to reach for him?
I thought it was going to be Terrace Marshall until like the floodgates of the game was broken.
I know. I'm so disappointed.
When I first put out like my wide receiver, you know, ranks, like I was like, oh, I'm one of the highest on him. Like, this is great. Like, cool. Like, I'm an early plant flag. Yeah, like hell, like it's just everyone's on him now. So I thought I was gonna, you know, consistently get him. I will say I've already drafted a couple rookie drafts right now, and even in the most current draft I'm in now with you know, a lot of guys that, you know, you guys might follow, like Scott Barrett and Matthew Berry and Evan Silva and those guys. He's still winning.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I don't know. Some jabrones, I don't know, but he still went. Terrace Marshall still went in the second round of that draft. It's super flex league, so definitely it's super flex this year has been like the gift to this rookie class because those quarterbacks are really making super flex. Like, it gets kind of sketchy in non-super flex leagues. Like, if you have like the 107 or like 108, you kind of got to be talked into some of your players, unless it's someone like you just are all in on. But like in a super flex league, those 5 quarterbacks really, really help that format out. And you're getting guys like I got Etienne at 109 in that same draft.
I'm looking right at it, right for the throne.
Yeah, and it's, you know, Superflex has really, really helped this draft class out. If you're in a Superflex league, you're going to feel a lot better about this draft class.
Did you trade up for that, or did you trade back?
I traded back.
And you still got him at 109. That's insane.
Yeah, traded back, made some moves around the board. I was pretty comfortable with a few guys. There are 8 guys in Superflex I feel real comfortable out, and I did get him at 9, so I was happy. But yeah, Superflex really helps this class. I will say, like middle late rounds. I mean, there are some guys I do like a little bit. I I kind of like Nico Collins a little bit, especially as like a late round throw. Kylan Hill I like as another late round throw. Kind of you take some shots on some of these guys.
You took Trask over him though.
Over who? Oh,
over
Nico,
Kylan
yeah.
Hill. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's Superflex League.
Of course.
You gotta play the game in Superflex, man. I mean, those guys are currency. What are you gonna do, man?
No, they really are.
Yeah, I mean, I was a guy when I started out in Superflex leagues. I tried to go against the grain and say, well, yeah, it doesn't change anything with inside the position. It just makes quarterbacks more valuable. And then the thing about that strategy is you need the rest of the league to play along with that strategy, and it just doesn't happen. I mean, quarterbacks are just valued so highly in that format that you got to get on the train. It's just so hard to build an adequate Superflex roster by not investing in the quarterback position. It's just really hard. I've really fought against this for multiple years. I'd made some rosters work doing it, but it's just very hard to consistently pull off. You're really working uphill, and it's really hard to trade those guys and get adequate value. Just because of the way they're treated in those formats, just the scarcity and the supply and demand of those quarterbacks. Even guys like at the back end of rosters are hard to move, like a Jameis Winston and stuff like that. It's really hard to get adequate value. Sam Darnold, who just got traded, like you say, like, oh well, this may be another window I have to sell. Like, it's really hard to get adequate value for a starting quarterback. People want to give you like low or like mid twos for him, and you're like, no, this is a starting quarterback. Like that dude's inherently worth more than this, but that's all you can really get. And like people are like, oh, I'm not gonna give you that. So I mean, you really got to play the QB currency game in those formats. I fought it for a long time, but you got to just get quarterbacks and suck them up.
Love that. Absolutely love that. All right, you want to let everybody know where to find you one more time? Let them know where to find your work.
Yeah, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Reiterate everything off-season, all off-season content. There's no paywall, no subscription required. You just go read what you want. The cool thing about this, like we kind of talked about before the show, is that we're not writing in-season content. So like stuff that we put out like 3 weeks ago is still relevant today. So you can go back and read some older stuff. I've been updating stuff like for the pro days and as player movement goes down and like all the rankings and the write-ups. And then just at Lord Reeves at Twitter, shoot me a follow, ask me a question. I'm pretty responsive on there. I don't tweet a lot on my own anymore, but I am pretty responsive if you do ping me with a question.
No, I love that, man. Obviously, you're on the show with this small fellow over here, so we appreciate you for coming on.
Oh, no, this is the stuff I look forward to, man. Like when I love going on shows I haven't been on, people I haven't interacted with, like you, because not as a chance for me to also share my brand, but I hopefully can help you guys get something out of it too. Hopefully, a couple people, click the link and say, yeah, I found this, I enjoyed it, and they're gonna come back next week when you have another guest on, but I love interacting with people I haven't interacted with yet.
Oh, this link, like the one below, right, where it says you hit subscribe on youtube.com/fantasy intervention. Yes, please go do that. Every subscriber matters, even if it's just one. We really appreciate it. Please go hit subscribe on youtube.com/fantasy intervention. If you guys want to find our content, we're available on fantasyintervention.com. Once again, that's fantasyintervention.com. You guys can also find our content on Twitter at joinourcircle_. Huge shout out to Fantasy Football Discussion on Facebook. All 24,000 of you all have been amazing and keep us running. So we really appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. And thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.